Are you comfortable with the role Rudy Giuliani's been playing on behalf of the president?
I don't really know enough about what he's doing. I knew he traveled over there to try to seek information on Hunter Biden's corruption. I think a lot of Americans see the $50,000 a month Hunter Biden was making, and it doesn't pass the smell test.
I see that you wanted to get that in there. So you think it's perfectly legitimate for the president to use his personal attorney to go to a foreign country and seek help for a political campaign?
I think it's equally as legitimate as the Democrats going there and saying, hey, we should investigate Trump.
The whataboutisms continue despite growing evidence that Donald Trump and his cronies tried to strong-arm Ukraine into digging up or actually making up dirt on Joe Biden and his son. Joining me now, Jason Johnson of TheRoot.com, Natasha Bertrand of Politico, and David Corn. It's been a long morning. And David Corn of Mother Jones. Natasha, on that front, the main rival for Donald Trump's affections politically the person we just saw, Rand Paul, is Lindsey Graham. And Lindsey Graham has, been all over the place on sort of issues like the Kurds, et cetera. What is going on in terms of who is now influencing Donald Trump more? Because now you have Lindsey Graham out there being the defender-in-chief on this Ukraine stuff. I don't know if he got asked or was answered the question about whether or not he thinks that the Trump kids and son-in-law ought to be investigated for profiting off the presidency of their dad. But
yeah, I mean, well, our reporting shows that Republicans have really started to sour in general on Rudy Giuliani, and that they've been telling the president, you should really distance yourself from this guy, because we also know now that Rudy Giuliani is under investigation in the Southern District of New York.
Are they going to throw him under the bus?
Well, we already kind of saw that last week with the president distancing himself and saying, well, Rudy was my lawyer, haven't talked to him, but actually it was then reported that they had lunch together at Trump's golf course this weekend. So there's conflicting messages going on there. But of course, Rudy Giuliani is under investigation in the Southern District of New York for potentially violating Foreign Agent Registration Act laws. And it's only a matter of time, I think, before Trump is going to have to cut him loose. I mean, Giuliani has said that he remains the president's lawyer and that he may not be going out there and directly representing him on things related to Ukraine because of all the conflicts of interest, obviously. But I think Giuliani wants that legitimacy, obviously, that comes with being tied to the president. Yeah. And he's not going to be willing to give that up lightly.
Let me play really quickly, because one of the things, Jason, that seems like it does create somewhat of a breaking point, or at least a slight bit of distance between Donald Trump and his normally quite obedient Republican members in the Congress, is this issue of Turkey. This is the current Defense Secretary, Mike Esper, who normally everyone in Trump world is completely loyal. But here he is talking about, on Face the Nation, about what's happening in Syria, the atrocities that have resulted from Trump's idea about pulling out.
It's a terrible situation. We condemn it. We have condemned it. These are just as things that we told the Turks would happen and play out. Who's conducting it? It's unclear at this point in time. There are Turkish regular forces, and there are Turkish proxy forces engaged as well.
And we don't know who they are.
We don't know. That's right. We don't know exactly who they all are and what they're doing, but we're hearing the same reports from the battlefield as well.
These are war crimes.
It appears to be, if true, that they would be war crimes.
And so that's the defense secretary, and he's saying they don't know who they are. I'm not sure that that's true. But here is now a Republican senator, Senator Kramer, who's on State of the Union this morning. And rather than echoing that, this is what he said.
I wish it had been different, I can tell you that, but I'm not sure the president had a lot of choices. I know we like to sort of oversimplify these complicated relationships, but I think the logical question is, were we prepared to stay there and fight the Turks, given the fact that the Turks seem to be committed to coming across the border and establishing this militarized zone with or without our staying there. So I think the president at that point has not so much a binary choice as a decision to make as to which friend, if you will, do we stand with in this circumstance.
And we've seen Lindsey Graham be a bit two-faced on this whole issue of Syria and the Kurds, and he's normally always with Trump. Do you think that the Lindsey Grahams of the world stand long, even in condemning what's happening in Syria, given the fact that B for Trump is really where they are supposed to be, at least on their side?
Look, I don't trust anything Lindsey Graham says. He will flow with the wind. He will flow with the winds of war. He will flow with the winds of politics. He can't really be relied upon. But I think, Joy, that the larger question here is this. It is the quintessential example of how the irresponsibility of this administration when it comes to foreign policy, Donald Trump's refusal to sort of run his ideas past the generals who he supposedly listens to before he does them, that causes serious consequences. We're not just talking about the human rights abuses, because if we're honest, there's been all sorts of bombing in that region, sometimes by us, that has harmed civilians. I mean, it has been a dangerous dangerous, bloody part of the world for many, many, many years, both Syria and northern parts of Turkey. But it's the fact that just Newsweek on Friday reported that Turkish shelling almost hit U.S. troops because the president wasn't clear enough in where we should go. Well, are we pulling out? Are we going across the street? Are we going to get coffee? Are we going to Starbucks? It's not clear. And that's why this is dangerous. And unfortunately, even Republicans who understand the human rights abuses available, they are more concerned about their electoral future than they are about our national sovereignty and our safety and our foreign policy in that part of the world.
Yeah, and just to show you the difference between elected and non-elected. So Marco Rubio, he tweets out this morning. He doesn't, go on TV. We would love to have him on the show. I think we invited him. I don't think he's available this morning to say a Turkish broke-back fighter is horrible, horrible, horrible. He tweets that out. It's so terrible. But here's James Mattis, who's now not in anymore, who hasn't said a lot. But here's what he said this morning on Meet the Press. The former Secretary of Defense.
ISIS is not defeated. We have got to keep the pressure on ISIS so they don't recover. We may want a war over. We may even declare it over. You can pull your troops out, as President Obama learned the hard way, out of Iraq. But the enemy gets a vote, we say in the military.
The problem is they don't say that when they actually work for Trump. They only say when they leave.
Well, they may say it to Trump. We don't know what they're saying. But listen, Mattis was on this morning. He's selling a book. He refuses to tell the American public what his candid evaluation is of President Trump as commander-in-chief. Yes, he left. Yes, he resigned. He keeps pointing to that letter. But people like him, like Rex Tillerson, H.R. McMaster, they've listened in on these conversations that he had with foreign leaders that we hear about from unidentified sources that show he's really not fit to do the basics of the job. Yep. So they owe it. They swore an oath to the Constitution. They consider themselves patriots. I take them at their word. But that means telling the American public what's really going on in the White House that leads to this type of incoherence, war crimes, and conflict in Turkey.
Absolutely. And instead, they're doing what Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary this morning, is saying that he's been authorized to shut down the Turkish economy on Donald Trump's command. We didn't even get to play that one. That's what he said this morning. He really said that on Trump's command, I shall shut down Turkey. Jason Johnson, Natasha Bertrand, David Corn. What a world. Coming up, very special.